Thank you for waiting. And ladies and gentlemen, we would like to start the Three Links special session, disaster waste towards resilient waste management. Firstly, I'd like to show my gratitude towards joining this session. Thank you very much. Then this session is coordinated by the Japan Society of Material Cycle and Waste Management and supported by Ministry of Environment Japan. So prior to the panel discussion, I'd like to introduce Ms. Kobayakawa from Ministry of Environment Japan. She kindly deliver opening remarks to the session. So Kobayakawa-san, please deliver your opening remarks.
Thank you, Higashi-san. Can you hear me? Hello, everyone. I'm Ayuko Kobayakawa from Ministry of the Environment, Government of Japan. I would like to express our great gratitude for you attending the Three Links special session of disaster waste toward the resilient waste management today. This special session is coordinated by the Japan Society of Material Cycle and Waste Management and supported by the Ministry of the Environment, Government of Japan. Prior to the session, I'd like to introduce the activity of Ministry of the Environment in the field of disaster waste management. As you know, Japan has suffered, As you know, Japan has suffered from many natural disasters, including the Great East Japan earthquake in 2011. The damage caused by the earthquake and tsunami was enormous. Since then, natural disasters such as earthquakes and typhoons have occurred frequently. In Japan, disaster waste is generated by such natural disasters. Disaster waste is characterized by the generation of a huge amount of waste at once and mixtures of various types of waste. Ministry of the Environment is working to promote the appropriate treatment and management of such waste. For example, the Great East Japan earthquakes in 2011 generated about 20 million tons of disaster waste and about 10 million tons of tsunami deposit, about 80% of which were recycled. We would like to share and discuss our knowledge, experience, and technology of disaster waste management, including recycling. The theme of today's session is disaster waste in perspective of resilient waste management. Globally, we watch various issues in the field of waste, for example, plastic recycling, marine deposit, climate change and waste management, and vast amount of disaster waste generated by natural disasters. Resilience is our effort to address such issues. In this session, we will discuss disaster waste in the perspective of resilient waste management and how it should be addressed in relation to other waste-related issues. We look forward to a fruitful panel discussion on mainstreaming disaster waste. At the outset, I mentioned that Japan's knowledge on disaster waste will be utilized in the Asia-Pacific region. In fact, there are many possibilities that huge disasters will occur in Japan, such as Nankai mega thrust earthquake or an earthquake in Tokyo metropolitan area. When Japan is hit by disaster, we may ask for assistance from Asia-Pacific countries. Today's panelists have background in academia with knowledge of waste. We hope that discuss and specific initiatives regarding disaster waste in the Asia-Pacific region will continue to progress, and that disaster waste management will advance throughout the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kobayakawa-san. ありがとうございました。Then we go on to the panel discussion. Then I pass the mic to the chair, Tajima Sensei.
Thank you, Higashi-san. My name is Ryo Tajima from National Institute for Environmental Studies, Japan. I will facilitate the panel discussion. And before moving on to the discussion with our panelists, I would like to briefly introduce the resilience in waste management systems in Japan. So definitions. I'm not sparing any time to explain the definition of resilience. I know this gives headache to many people, but I'm just showing two very well-cited definition of resilience in the academia. There are some differences between the definitions. We see various definitions, but I think it's safe to say that it basically means the capacity to reduce damage to systems after any disturbance and to cope with or adapt to and transform to maintain the critical functionality of that system. And as I said, resilience relates to response to a disturbance. So what kind of disturbance are we thinking about? This is a figure from the report of UK DFID. They categorized disturbance into two. One is shock, acute shock, that includes natural hazards like earthquakes, conflicts, wars, technological hazards, and also chronic stress. So more slowly, slow change, for example, climate change, economic downturn, etc. So, sorry, I'm going to skip this slide, and that's one thing. Well, what resilience of what are we thinking about? Another point of discussion is related to the relationship between resilience and sustainability. So there are many ways to understand this relationship. Resilience can be understood as a component of sustainability, or sustainability can be understood as a component of resilience, or they can be understood as two concepts with no correlations. That's what is said in this article of Martins and colleagues. This model is one of the understandings. It depicts the understanding of resilience as a component of sustainability. So this gray line shows the not so resilient system, and the blue dotted line is the resilient system. So if a system is more resilient, it can absorb more shocks, it can recover quickly, and it can adapt and achieve a better state of sustainability than it had before the disturbance. So this is one way, but we are aware that there are many other ways to understand the relationships. For example, some people say that while sustainability is normative, so it's something we should pursue, it's a goal. Some people, resilience is non-normative, so it's just a characteristics of a system, and it could be either a good thing or a bad thing. But anyway, so how is this understood in Japan? As this figure shows, in Japan, we understand the relationship between sustainability and resilience in terms of the more sustainable, the more resilient. So you can see we have the same understanding as this figure. Resilience policy in Japan is called Kokudo Kyojinka. It's written here. It says national resilience here. We have the fundamental law for national resilience. And based on that law, the national government has developed this fundamental plan for national resilience. This serves as the guidelines for other sector-specific laws, including sector-specific plans, including the plan for waste management. So it's kind of an umbrella plan. And the same kind of plan is also developed at municipal levels. So there is a fundamental plan for regional resilience at the prefectural level and municipal level. And they also serve as guidelines as for their own waste management plans. So the fundamental plan for national resilience, it touches upon aspects of waste management. There are 8 specific policies listed in the plan. First one is preparation and review of disaster waste management plans. This is the preparedness plan that we must make before a disaster occurs. Install waste incineration facilities that can operate independently even in the event of disaster. So I think most waste treatment facilities depend on basic infrastructures like water supplies and electricity supplies. But this number 2 policy aims for installing facilities that can operate without those basic infrastructures. So after disasters, those infrastructures can be damaged and water supplies and electricity supplies may be damaged. So it's a good thing to develop this kind of facility. Number 3, establishment of disaster resilient waste treatment facilities. So it should have a strong structure. Number 4, securing cross-jurisdictional waste treatment. In Japan, basically waste should be treated within the jurisdiction that was generated. Yes. So, but in the event of disasters, the amount of disaster waste generated could exceed the capacity of the local government. So in that case, we must, cross-jurisdictional waste treatment becomes one good option. So securing means to be prepared to for coordination. Number 5 is secure temporary storage sites. This temporary storage site is understood as a core of disaster waste management. It receives all the disaster waste temporary and in that site, there might be activities of separation or crushing to facilitate treatment and disposal on the latter stages. Number 6 is securing materials and equipment for that. And number 7, recycling of disaster waste. And number 8 is education and training. So sometimes it's kind of resilience is complicated and disaster resilience is complicated. It sometimes is understood that it's equal to effective disaster waste management. But in fact, as the example shows, at least in Japan, it's understood more than just effective disaster waste management. So it's a component actually of resilient. Disaster waste management is a component of resilient waste management. So when a disaster happens, it affects properties and other infrastructures, then cleanup activities generate disaster wastes. We also have normal solid wastes, and those 2 types of waste enter the waste management system, which results in either speedy or non-speedy recovery or high or low level of sanitation. One key consideration is here the waste management system and or the disaster waste management system, whether it's effective or not, but it also, resilience is also related to how we continue the waste management of the normal solid wastes, and also about reduction of disaster waste and orderly discharge of disaster wastes. And if we locate all the 8 policies to this illustration, we see that most of the policies, our policies cover or are related to establishing a smooth disaster waste management system. And some limited, just few policies are related to other aspects. In fact, reduction of the amount of disaster waste is actually covered by different ministry, not in the Ministry of Environment. It's covered by Ministry of Land Infrastructure. So they promote, for example, installation of anti-seismic mechanisms for buildings. So this kind of gives you a broader picture of how resilience and waste management system is understood and promoted in Japan. So I'd like to give you some more specific image examples. This is a waste treatment facility in Imabari City. It's a city in Shikoku Island. This is a famous facility for being a very resilient one. It can operate after disasters, even if the basic infrastructures are shut down. So they can use groundwaters, and they also have independent power generators so that they can start their operations. And once they restart the operations, then this treatment facility has waste to energy technology, so they can also generate generate electricity from waste. And also this facility is very disaster resistant, so it's designated as an official shelter of the city. And during normal times, this place is used for evacuation center setup drills at the community. And also the members of the community can use like the halls in this facility for events like sport events or some market events. But what if the facility was damaged? So this happens often. For example, it also happened after the Kumamoto earthquake in 2016. The waste incinerator was damaged after the earthquake, so it had to stop for about 1 month before it restarted operating. But the municipal government cannot stop collection of waste because people cannot stop generating waste if they still live in the community. So the collection resumed after 3 days of the occurrence of the earthquake. But the problem was where to treat all these collected wastes. So for a while, they decided to pile it in an open land in the nearby the facility. And then they coordinated this cross-jurisdictional treatment with nearby municipal governments in an ad hoc manner to cope with the damage on treatment plants. So for about 1 month, these collected wastes were treated at treatment plants in different jurisdictions. And while doing that, they concentrated on the recovery of the treatment plant. So regarding disaster waste management, there are several key considerations for smooth disaster waste management. I already mentioned about continuity of solid waste management here. We have the aspect of disaster waste management after disasters here. For example, as I already mentioned, temporary storage sites, this is the key. Sorting at source, that also becomes a key, and how we recycle it. And besides these operational aspects, other management aspects become also important for smooth disaster waste management, including estimation and post-disaster action planning based on the estimation. Also, public relations, financing, coordinating, these are also important aspects. These are not actually covered in the fundamental plan for disaster national resilience, but these are actually covered in the guidelines for disaster waste management in Japan. So in terms of learning education to the people, there are some emerging examples in Japan. This one is a disaster waste management drill undertaken in a community in this Katsuragi town. So people were asked to join this drill to practice taking out disaster waste from their homes and loading it on trucks and bringing it to temporary storage sites. And after this drill, they gathered and discussed what can be improved to achieve a better way to discharge waste, disaster wastes. So thank you for your attention. This was kind of a brief introduction of what we do in Japan in terms of building a resilient waste management system. But this is just one example of how we understand and implement resilience in waste management. So through this panel discussion, we would like to welcome broader ideas and we'd like to share ideas and knowledge towards a shared view on this resilient waste management system in Asia Pacific, so not limited to Japan in a wider context. We see that there are the attention towards resilience in waste management is rising, as you see in the number of publications increasing steadily from 10 years ago. So today we have 4 great panelists. Thank you for joining us today. Dr. Glenn, Glenn-san, Tonet-san, Awasada-san, Suzuki-san, please allow me to call you in san. And I would like to ask each panelist to introduce yourselves, starting from Glenn-san, please.
Thank you very much, Tajima-sensei. Now I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Can you see my screen now? Okay. So my name is Glenn Fernandez. I'm from the Philippines, but currently I'm based here in Abu Dhabi in the UAE. I'm an associate professor at Rabdan Academy. Rabdan Academy is focusing on safety, security, and defense. So I teach emergency management and business continuity management. Much of my training in environmental management is from Kyoto University. Before coming to the Middle East, I worked in China as well as in Thailand. So I look forward to meaningful discussion. I have just finished a capacity development project in the Philippines and in Fiji, helping local governments develop their contingency plan for disaster waste management. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Glenn-san. So Tonetto-san, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for your invitation to join this panel discussion. My name is Maria Antonia Tanchuling, or Tonet is my nickname. I'm a professor at the Institute of Civil Engineering as well as the Environmental Engineering program at the University of the Philippines. I'm also currently the Dean of the College of Engineering. And my research interests would be on solid and plastic waste management and microplastics. So right now we are trying to, with the help of Higashi-san and MOEJ, we're trying to develop the disaster waste management guidelines for the Philippines. Thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you very much. So next is we have Awasada-san at the venue. Please wait a moment for me to share the slide.
There we go.
Good afternoon, everyone here and at home. My name is Awasada Pongpipat. I'm a researcher at King Mongkut University of Technology, Chonburi in Thailand. My background is environmental and chemical engineering. What I do for my research and what I teach is about waste to energy systems, and as well as greenhouse gas management, low carbon city, waste and climate change, and plastic waste management.
Thank you very much. So last but not least, Suzuki-san.
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Shinya Suzuki. I am an associate professor in Department of Civil Engineering in Fukuoka University. I have graduated from the University of Tokyo since 2000. And my workplace is Kyushu area, which has many heavy rain disasters in recent years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Suzuki-sensei. So these are our excuse me, I will share the slide again. So we have 4 great panelists. I think we have a good mixture of expertise and also gender terms of. So let's move on to the discussions. I already explained this figure. So again, we are not, we can, of course, discuss about the disaster management itself, but we are not, the scope is not limited to it. That is what I was trying to say. So the first discussion topic is this, is resilience important for waste management systems? I assume most of our panelists agree, but I would also like to ask for the reasons why you think it's important or it is not important. And I would also like to ask ask everyone to actually join this session. If you read the QR code with your smartphone right now, you can join the vote. So I'd like to take like a minute for you to join. Is resilience important for waste management system? So the audience at the venue and also the audience online, you are welcome to join the vote. And the result is changing now. Interesting. Thank you. Thank you for joining the vote. This is already interesting to see that about 80% of people is quite sure that resilience is important, but 20%, about 20% of us think that, well, I guess it's important, but we're not actually quite sure. I think this is what this vote indicates. Thank you very much for your cooperation. I may ask you to join another vote. I'd like to change the question a little bit. Do you think resilience is considered as an important factor for waste management by the policymakers in your country? So if you read the QR code again, and I think you can edit the vote, and I'd like to see if there's any change or gap between our perception and the perception of the policymakers. Yes, click same QR code. Yes, yes. I just changed the question orally, and I'd like to edit your vote now. Okay. Do you think resilience is considered as important aspect of waste management by the policymakers in your country? Interesting. Thank you. Thank you very much for your cooperation. This is really interesting. So we have smaller percentage of yes, reaching nearly 60%. But we have some percentage, about 10, above 10% of no or maybe no. So uh, I think this indicates kind of a gap between the policymakers and theory or the academia. So thank you very much. This kind of sets the context of the discussion. So um, I guess it's important to be able to explain why resilience is important for waste management systems to policymakers. So I hope we get a lot of ideas on that during this discussion. So without further ado, I would like to ask the opinions of our panelists, beginning from Awasada-san, maybe?
Yes, okay, thank you very much. Is resilience important or not? Then for my idea is, of course, it's very important. And I think it's very nice that Tajima Sensei has posed before about the resilience and sustainability. I think when I was in my bachelor degree 30 years ago, we heard a lot about the word integrated waste management, but then it changed from the integrated, now it becomes sustainable. We heard a lot about the sustainable waste management and resilience management. Resilience waste management is like quite new, right? It's coming in trend right now. So it's becoming more and more important as we have faced a lot of disaster, a lot of hazards that happen, or even the pandemic. So I certainly believe that to change our waste management system to be to improve in the future, to develop it in the future, then it has to be more resilience. And of course, it has to be sustainably resilient. So altogether sustainable and also resilience as well. And from my background, because I work with climate change and greenhouse gas management on that side. So when we talk about resilience, then I think about another word is the climate change resilience. You heard about that. So we talk about that a lot with the city planning, or when you have the flood, drought, the impact of the fluctuation of the climate change. So we all want to have our town, our city, our countries to be resilient to the climate change. So when we talk about the waste, resilience in waste, then I associate my idea with the climate change resilience as well. It's intersect, it's have some part intertwine, especially in the part that when we have the flood, then that kind of disaster, if you think about the adaptation plan for the climate change, then that is the part where resilience of the climate change coming in. So for me, I think in the future, if we want to plan for the resilience waste management, we should also think about climate change resilience as well in the plan. Maybe we try to reduce plastic use. Maybe we try to build something that is more sustainable in terms of reduce the greenhouse gas emission. So that should be the idea. I mean, in my idea. But however, climate change resilience is not always have to be the first priority, especially when you have the disaster, right? When you have disaster, when you have pandemic, of course, you will need to use a lot of plastic, and then you cannot just protect the use of fossil fuel. We cannot avoid that. Then we will need to use a lot of plastic and protection gears. So in that case, I think we just have to plan wisely. What are the steps? What are the stage that we should incorporate the climate change resilience in our planning for resilient waste management, or at which part we just have to deprioritize it? Yes. So that's for me from now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your inspiring comment. Yes, thank you again for bringing up some important keywords. Sustainability, of course, and more specifically in terms of climate change adaptation. And I think, yes, it's also important to be aware of the priority depending on the situation, depending on how urgent the situation is. Thank you very much. I think I would like to receive comments from all four panelists first, and then maybe open the discussion to the floor afterwards. So may I ask Glenn-san now for your opinion?
Thank you very much, Tajima-sensei. In the case of the Philippines, because of recent major disasters, we have come to realize that we should have resilient waste management systems. For example, in the case of the 2013 Typhoon Haiyan, which affected Central Philippines, the amount of waste generated was equivalent to 137% of the annual waste generation of the entire country. So the local officials were overwhelmed. So based on that kind of experience, the idea that waste management should have its own contingency plans for addressing major disasters is now becoming more popular among policymakers. In our team reviewed 60 different waste management and disaster management laws in the Philippines, and we only realized that only one policy actually explicitly mentioned disaster waste management, and it is the National Disaster Risk Management Plan for 2020 to 2030. And even that plan, just the mention of disaster waste management was just in passing as one of the emerging topics that should be addressed in the near future. So because there is no policy yet, what I and my colleagues are doing at the moment is to promote other established frameworks like business continuity management to help maybe landfill operators or solid waste management companies, helping local governments in order for them to be more prepared for disasters in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So we have another keyword, business continuity management. Maybe we would like to come back to this topic again afterwards. So next, for the next speaker, Suzuki-san, may I ask you to give your comment?
Yeah, thank you very much, Tajima-san. My answer is, of course, yes, because solid waste management is essential for our life to make our life clean, secure, and comfortable, and clean with our environment. So that even during the normal times and the disaster times, so that it's essential to make or construct the suitable solid waste management systems during the any time. So that we must consider the more suitable management system for the smooth for taking care of the smooth connection of the normal times waste management and the disaster time waste management. But I think, as you can see, there is some difference, some gap between the today's participant itself and the policy makers thinking for the such slide shows polling. I think it's during the disaster times, policymakers must think of the many things, of course, including the saving the human lives. So the なんていうかな importance of the or priority of the disaster waste management will be changed concerning the situation of the situation of the disaster times. For example, in case of Japan, there are many heavy natural disasters, including the big earthquakes and the heavy rain disaster, or some kind of natural disasters. So the Japanese policymakers think of very important issues for the disaster waste management. Of course, the many countries' policymakers, I guess, many policymakers has changed the standing point of the disaster waste management during the disaster times. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Suzuki-san, for mentioning about the link between normal solid waste management and disaster waste management. So, Toneto-san, can you also give a comment, please?
Yes, of course, resilience is very important in waste management. And your introduction on the framework of what resilience in waste management was very good. So how do we achieve resilience in waste management? We can also use the usual, the pyramid, the inverted pyramid that we want to prioritize reduction of waste, for example. So to achieve resilience in waste management, let's start from the upstream side in reduction of, we prevent generation of disaster waste first by designing our infrastructures well. As I think you mentioned, in Japan, I think you have incentives for people to have their, for building owners to have their buildings inspected or have seismic monitors. I think those are very important to ensure that we prevent the generation of disaster waste, to ensure that the buildings do not collapse during earthquakes. So in the same manner, we should have flood control measures so that we prevent floods. So I'm talking about, like, even prior to the disaster, we should ensure to have sustainable, resilient infrastructure. And that way we reduce the amount of disaster waste that we generate. At the same time, we should also especially ensure that our waste management infrastructure is resilient. For example, designing landfills that will not slide during a heavy rainfall. It's quite common in many of our countries who have a lot of rainfall and whose landfills are not well designed. So that's your landfill that is supposed to receive the disaster waste, and we don't want them being the disasters themselves. So that's in the upstream side. And of course, when the disaster strikes, our waste management system should be able to cope and accommodate treat all the wastes that will be generated. And we have to ensure that they will still be in operation despite the disasters. So yeah, so it's really very important to have resilient waste management systems.
Thank you very much. So I guess your opinion highlighted again the importance of being resistant, the infrastructures to be resistant in terms of both the waste management infrastructures and infrastructures and buildings in general. Thank you very much. So we already have a wide variety of perspectives and proposals here on how important resilience is. If there's any additional points that you want to make from the floor, I would like to ask, the discussion is open now. If there's any opinion. Yes, please.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Calvin, and I'm from Canada. So I just want to echo some of the opinions from the panel. I think one of the very important things is about the cost efficiency of a solid waste management system. Now, a lot of time when we think about the resiliency of the system, we think about the ability to overcome difficulties. And in order for us to do that, we actually need to have a more cost-effective system. Now, the reasons why I'm talking about this is that I'm not sure about in Japan or in Asia, but in North America, we actually spent more than half of the money to manage the collection and transportation of the solid waste. Now, to me, this is not very effective. We will expect that the majority of the money actually goes to the incinerator, recycling, landfill, those sort of things, but half of the money actually goes to the collection and transportation of the solid waste. Now, if we have any disaster, we have a huge volume of the solid waste, then definitely a more effective system should be able to help us to overcome the difficulties. So I just want to listen, from the panels. Do you guys have any input or comments with respect to the cost efficiency of the system?
Thank you very much, Kelvin, for your new insight. If any of our panelists would like to comment on that question.
Okay, I'll try. I'll try to give an input. If I got your question correctly, you were asking about costs of especially of transportation costs, hauling out a huge volume of disaster waste. That's an important issue. That's one of the reasons why we should have temporary storage sites nearer where the disaster struck. In the case of, I think Dr. Glenn mentioned earlier, the huge typhoon in 2013, Typhoon Haiyan, all the disaster waste were brought to a landfill which is 16 kilometers away from the city center where all the disaster wastes were generated. So that's a lot of energy that was expended just for hauling out, and then you'd see those trying to recover the recyclable materials traveling all the way to that place just to get whatever they can get. So if we were able to plan earlier and as I'd also echo what Suzuki-san said, I fully agree that the best way to prepare for a disaster waste, to have a good disaster waste management, is to have a good in the normal times. It is very important to have this waste management infrastructure in place. So in that place, there were no junk shops. There were no shops receiving recyclables. So that is why in the city center, you have nowhere to bring these recyclable materials, but bring it to the landfill, which is situated as some distance from the city. So if we had those infrastructure in the city, it would have cost less. And secondly, although it's not applicable in the Philippines, we're still working on it because incinerators are not so, the perception is that there's a negative perception. But I think to have mobile waste treatment technologies that are available, like modular incinerators that can treat these wastes on site so that we don't have to transport the wastes all the way. I was really awed how Japan did it with Fukushima. By the way, it just celebrated its not celebrated the earthquake, right? The great earthquake. Anyway, it was able to do so, process the wastes immediately on site because they had small incinerators that were brought there. Of course, it's a big plus that they are the technology is theirs, that they were able to come up with the incinerators needed for that disasters. But maybe we should work on those on those technologies that are modular, mobile, that can respond easily, that we can use easily when a disaster strikes. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Tonetto-san. Yes, I think you mentioned very important points about how we can manage disaster waste cost efficiently after disasters. Now, one thing on my mind is how can we achieve cost efficiency and higher resilience from normal times? So I think one aspect of resilience is being redundant, I guess, to have backup systems. But if we try to install those backup systems, that costs more. And is it wise to spend more money to be prepared for some disasters that might not happen for the coming 100 years? So I think that is one sort of challenge to mainstream resilience in the mind of policymakers. If there's any opinion about this cost efficiency, yes, please.
Okay, from a developing country perspective, okay, you come from Canada, right? I would think about what happened in Japan. Sorry, in Thailand. So I think we cannot avoid to invest a lot in the capital cost because for the resilient waste management infrastructure. So I think that is the if we want to talk about the cost management, then I think we have to invest a lot to build it from beginning. And because Thailand is developing, so we have chance to invest into new system. So if we decide it from beginning to be resilient, to be disaster protection, then we will avoid the cost that will come from the rebuild or the maintenance and operation in the end. So that is from my perspective as the developing countries that we are building something more and more. And then I just found out this news about your Italy countries. He has they have a lot of disaster recently and also affect a lot with the COVID-19 as well. So they invest 2.1 billion to renovate the separation of waste collection system. So now they invest a lot that just to have the facility that can accommodate the different type of waste and also to recycling a lot more. So I think it's quite hard to avoid the capital costs, and investment is very important. Yes.
Thank you. So yes, I think you also mentioned, well, kind of linked the perspective of being cost efficient and also connecting the waste management normal times and disaster times. So if we invest in improving the resilience of waste management system, and if the investment is also effective for the solid waste management in normal times and also for disaster waste management after disasters, then I think that would become a great investment. And I think Suzuki-san might have some opinion about this, comment on this.
My opinion. Thank you, Tajima-san. I think when we consider the cost efficiency of the disaster waste management, I think it's very important to construct the optimal solution of the balance between the some investment of the infrastructure of the waste treatment. For example, the incineration plant or landfill site and so on, and the making the coordination or cooperation in the social systems, including the cooperation of the human resources, because in case of Japan, I think I am also anxious about the increased trend of the cost of the disaster waste in some recent years. But in case of the relatively smaller municipalities, has less human resources and less finances and less equipment for the suitable treatment or suitable treatment of the disaster waste. So the I strongly believe in case of such situation, it's very important and essential for us to make the smooth cooperation of the all stakeholders of the overcoming the this problem of the disaster waste management. Of course, there are very huge and various kind of disaster waste generated even when the natural disaster occurs. But if we can separate of the adequate for the disaster waste, we can also manage or some attain the suitable management of each kind of materials or each kind of disaster waste. So the it's essential for of course, not only the fundraising, but also the many cooperation or some coordination of the coordination of the people, including the human residents or sometimes including the policymakers. It's my opinion. It's a very important topic of the cost efficiency of the disaster waste management.
Thank you very much. You've touched upon another very important aspect of resilience. I guess it is about networks or network governance or cooperation. So maybe Glenn-san, would you like to give any comment on this?
Thank you, Tajima-sensei. Most of the local politicians are actually not aware of their options for, building resilience of the solid waste management system. So it's really important for these local politicians to have the science advice or technical advice from maybe from the academe, from the universities, or from professional associations. So that's why, as much as possible, we would like to encourage our professional associations like organizations of civil engineers, of environmental planners, other maybe NGOs working on solid waste management to provide technical advice to politicians or mayors of cities that are likely to experience, disasters that can generate huge amount of debris. So this highlights the importance of having systems for creating contingency plans or business continuity plans, because when you create the plans, you are actually already looking at the cost consideration, making cost benefit analysis, for example, for potential solutions, like if you will diversify, replicate, or have some standby sites, such as temporary storage sites. So this cost consideration will be discussed during the planning process. So if they don't have the contingency planning process, then it will be very expensive, because if you think of solutions after the disaster, that's more expensive than considering the cost before the disaster. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for now mentioning about contingency planning. Yes, in Japan, we, as I mentioned in my earlier slides, we have this disaster waste management plans that is supposed to be developed before a disaster strikes. But in many cities, they just produce the document, the plan document, based on a pro forma. So there is a limited amount of discussion, limited coordination during planning process. But I think Glenn-san mentioned a very important point that actually the plan, rather than the plan itself, the plan document itself, the process to develop the plan and to have coordination and discussion during the planning process is very important. Thank you very much, panelists. And one thing that came up on my mind was Awasada-san's project on networking. Would you like to introduce your project now and take this opportunity? I will share a slide. Please wait a moment.
Yes, I would like to talk about what happened in Thailand. So, sorry, I took his his mouse. Okay, so this is just what I want to say is about the situation in Thailand at this moment. So as Tajima Sensei pointed out, and Glenn Sensei pointed out about the how that local community might not well practice and be equipped or have the capacity to cope with all this disaster that happened. So this is there is a project that in King Mongkut University of Technology, Thonburi, in collaboration with Kasetsart University and as well as NIST, National Institute of Environmental Study of Japan. And that is the project under the lead of Professor Sirinthorn Prayun. So it's about enabling network. This project is to transfer, sorry. This is yes, is to enabling waste management scheme in response to disaster and climate change. So we put together our different scientists, and as we have now we have two countries networking, but we are very open and are really welcome for the collaboration that if you are interested in coming from different countries. So we try to have the knowledge transfer from like the expert and then go to the local level. So we try to develop the plan. Of course, we have the plan in the past, but then maybe the context change, the idea change. So we want to have the new waste management plan and then increase the capacity of the people to make the manpower becoming more knowledgeable about how to take care of the disaster. And this is the collaboration. So the work will divide into disaster waste and climate change, the plastic waste. So there are two themes that we are working all together. And this is the result of the first visiting to the local city. So we try to study how are they doing? Do they really ready? And the capacity that they can deal with the disaster and any climate problem that can come. So we study about if they recognize the different type of plastic, how can they recycle the plastic waste. What is the, this is for example, the result of the disaster that we try to evaluate from them. Can they identify the most severe disaster? This is the first preliminary test that we conducted on the environmental officer at the local levels. Okay, so after this, we will develop the plan. We will go down to talk with them and practice with them, and then we will do the test again. So that is the project that Professor Silin Thorntep has led for in Thailand. So we have the two case study. We have one in the Northeast and one in Nonthaburi, which is very quite urban area. So that you can follow us, and in the future, hopefully we can report about this result, that outcome, how the local people and the local city can know about the resilience, how can they develop. Yes.
Thank you very much for the introduction of a very exciting project. We are looking forward to hearing from you again in future Three Rings. So I think I should proceed to the next question now. Please wait for a while for me to share the slide. Okay. Now the second question is related to how we are going to achieve resilience. So can we mainstream resilience in waste management systems? And I think I would like to start this discussion again from a vote. Can we mainstream resilience in waste management systems? Again, if you have a smartphone, you can read the QR code and join the vote. Great. This is again a very interesting result. We see most people, well, 80% of us, nearly 80%, now it's 80%, are not super sure, but think that, well, yes, probably we can. Only 10% of us are super sure, and 10% of us have a negative perception. Yes, so it kind of indicates that we already recognize some challenges to mainstream resilience in waste management systems. So that is the question. And I would like to ask opinions from our panelists again. So maybe if you could point out some challenges or maybe opportunities for mainstreaming resilience, that would be great. So Awasada-san, can you start, please?
Thank you very much. I get a lot of talk. Sorry. So challenge for mainstreaming resilience is the challenge in my country would be that it doesn't happen so often. Okay, so people will find it hard to recognize the importance of it. Maybe when it happened, then we have to take care of it. But then after it died out and everything go back to the normal, then we might forget. The thing is, in my country, a lot of the government people and academics, we are aware of the importance of resilient management and disaster waste management. We have actively do the preparation of plan and everything, but when it doesn't happen really, so the people who have to implement it, they don't have practice, right? So they don't get too used to it. So the coordination of work, the workflow, when it really happened, then it's stuck. So people just what to do, and then how can we form the effective plan because of lack of practice? But that is fortunate, right? Fortunate that we don't have much practice. But yeah, so I think the barriers of mainstream is that because we don't see it too much in real life, in daily life. So that's why it might not become the mainstream that we put a lot of mind or money onto that. And then the opportunity, about the opportunity in my country is that now, because we committed to carbon neutrality. I think this one is the big issue in my country. So we committed for the net zero emission in 2065, and that made a lot of change in the government system and in the energy plan and electricity plan, waste management plan, all the plan. It has to be incorporated into something that we are going toward the net zero emission development goal. So because we revise a lot of plan, we revise a lot of national economic policy. So I think the opportunity in my country is that we can get along with that plan, and the resilient waste management can we can raise some voice and ask the government, maybe you consider about this, and the plan will become master plan, will become the action plan, and really implementation plan in the end. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. I absolutely agree that attention on climate change issues is we can consider it as an opportunity to open sort of the window of attention to the policymakers. So next, may I ask Suzuki-san? Oh, sorry, no, Glenn-san.
Okay. I think one of the challenges, for example, in the Philippines, is that our laws are not updated. So we don't have specific policies related to disaster waste management. So I think it's time to lobby with our policymakers to update the laws on solid waste, clean air, clean water. I think that will push the local government officials to do something about preparing for disasters, especially with their contractors or with their landfill operators. One opportunity I see is that the solid waste management professionals in the Philippines are becoming more and more aware about the need for disaster waste management. So in the past 2 years, there have been 2 major national conferences involving professional associations with a theme in disaster waste management. So this kind of events, they highlight the importance of waste management, and many of the participants are actually also local government officials. So if we can just continue organizing this kind of events, like webinars or even conferences, then we can keep the momentum in mainstreaming disaster waste management. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I ask you a very quick question? So you mentioned that there is not enough attention from the policymakers, but you also mentioned that there are awareness raising opportunities. So what do you think generates this gap between the the actual awareness raising activities you've been doing and the limited attention of the policymakers?
I think it's just hasn't come to the attention of policymakers. The need to, for example, update our solid waste management laws. So Professor Tonette already mentioned, incineration is a controversial topic in the Philippines. So when we have this kind of controversies, then maybe politicians are, would not like to tackle anything that might make them lose their votes, things like that. So I think we need politicians to be more open to advances in technology. So the range of options available will be wider. So it's a matter of educating also our politicians. So that's why I mentioned earlier the need to make science advice from the universities and from professional associations more readily available to our local and national officials. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think that's also connected to the issue of like giving priorities compared to other burning issues on solid waste management, including the climate change, net zero, etc. So yes, I think as you mentioned, well, not so to say educating policymakers is a very important issue. Thank you. And Suzuki-san, can you then?
Yes. Yeah. I think it's important to make the coordination or the coordination of stakeholders for the disaster waste management, as I mentioned before. And also, I think it's important to make the effort of the some improvement or some improvements of the improvement of the solid waste management during the normal times is very important, because I mentioned before, solid waste management is essential and very important for our life. Better or more secure and more comfortable for our life. We should concentrate on the our consciousness for the focusing on the some development of the normal times solid waste management. It's contribute to the technical level or network or some organizational level higher, even during the disaster waste management, I think.
Thank you very much. So yes, I agree with that too. Probably in many countries, the same technologies and same institutional frameworks for solid waste management is applied to disaster waste management. So it means that there is a sort of a core competency of waste management, and that should be probably developed through the practice of solid waste management and also preparedness actions. Thank you. And Tonetta-san, how do you think about this?
Yes. Yeah. Talking about the challenges, I think it has already been mentioned. I would say the main challenge, I listed here 2 main challenges. One is the cost. We already talked about it briefly earlier. But then I would also support what Dr. Glenn said, that if we don't build or prepare well, we don't have these plans, it's going to be more costly. So, and it's related to the second main challenge that I will mention. How do we, I don't believe at least in the Philippines, I think we have the funds for it. The priority is not just there. But so how do we build that? Then I think we need the political will also of our policymakers, and to be able to do that for us who are in this profession, in the academe, the researchers, maybe we should reach out more to our policymakers, and of course continue having the studies so that our policies, our recommendations, we have the supporting data, it's evidence-based policies. So I think that's the main challenge that we should try to work on now. In terms of opportunities, I would say that the big focus on marine debris, plastic debris specifically. And globally, it's a main concern. And Philippines being, I think the latest study says that we are the #1 emitter of plastics now in oceans. And if you look at the model would also, of course, based on the amount of rainfall that we are receiving in the country, and that we're very near the coastline. Anyway, there's a lot of funds and attention to plastics, marine plastics, and we can connect disaster waste with that. If we look at disaster waste and even the plastics that we see in oceans, a lot of them were caused by disasters, by floods, by typhoons. So I think if we can just package our, mainstreaming resilient waste management system, so in the framework of it's related to prevention of plastics, marine plastics. So yeah, that's what I think. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. So maybe as scientists or academia, it's important for us to try to show the link between the marine debris management, or maybe climate change adaptation, and disaster wastes, or becoming more resilient. So, it's intuitively, it sounds really right. It sounds nice. But maybe we should be able to explain those linkages in more detail, because at the end of the day, I think it becomes the issue of prioritizing policies. So thank you very much for our panelists. If there's anything you would like to add from the floor, this discussion is open. Yes, please.
Thank you very much. Very interesting discussion, and I appreciate facilitator and all the panelists, presentators. Yeah, so this is actually very fruitful. Yeah, just let me also point out about like plastic pollution, relation with the plastic pollution. Yeah, so actually now I have one project together with the UNEP in Bangkok and Vietnam. So we are trying to identify the causality or relationship between flooding with plastic pollution. Yeah, so theoretically we understand, so it must be. Yeah, so and then even in a community, so we had a questionnaire, they said, so this is because of the plastic pollution. Plastic is accumulated in the waterways and barriers, and then flood is occurred. Yeah, due to flood linked with the climate change. Yeah, but we really need the scientific evidence for this. Yeah, theoretically we understand, but so like statistically or epidemiologically, yeah, if we have this kind of data or scientific verification, so I think such a data is really impacted to the policymakers. So if we have this kind of data or information, yeah, to convince the policymakers or stakeholders, yeah, to implement actual activities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for sharing your experience. And yes, definitely scientific evidence that would become the key of communication. Anything? Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to just add some opportunity. Yes, I forget to mention about that. That is very important part that I really want to mention about it. You heard about the integration of gender equality, disability, and the last one, social inclusion. Yes, so I think for the resilient waste management in the future, the opportunity is that now people are aware of this inclusion approach. So when you do any projects like international projects or something very large in the future, then you have to sorry. So we should include this issue in our work, right? So we should think about the gender equality, the disability, and the all social type, or maybe the minorities that live in our country. Why I say is one of the opportunity is that these people, although they don't have a lot of strong voice at this moment, but they are integrated into our social in many different ways. So if we integrate them in our planning, so that increase the resilience in the future. So opportunity is that we recognize their importance, and then we try to educate them more, give them more space, and build the capacity for them. They will go to the different society of themselves, and then increase the knowledge. You heard a lot about the women in West, right? So that is a powerful group that we try to work on that. We have 4 women in here who only 4 women in here, but they are very powerful and strong in their way. Of course, my boss is there as well. So, so yes, so please, I think this one is another opportunity to be included.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's actually very important that you pointed out inclusivity as an opportunity. So yes, thank you very much. And unfortunately, time is approaching to close the session. It is far beyond my ability to sort of come up with one conclusion or to wrap up. So I am asking my colleague Higashi-san to do that.
Sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Shintaro Higashi. I'm from a private sector and I'm a consultant to conducting the disaster waste management project with, on behalf of the Ministry of Environment. Then I try to visualize today's session. I would like to share the slide. If time allows, I can discuss with this with you, but I think I just showed my idea. So after the, I think maybe 5 years or so, we just focus on disaster waste. Then we of course, in that disaster waste itself, we have many issues. But we'd like to mainstream the disaster waste. Then in the world now, there are many issues like disaster, plastic, health waste, or climate change, or normal solid waste management, and of course we have other projects in issues in waste management. Then a kind of networking. The keyword, today's keyword is networking or coordination. So we should think these. We should not think each issues as it's independent, but these are in issues like it's an affected or each other, or even we can improve by connecting that kind of network. So maybe we can strengthen the resilience. Then from the view of disaster, yes, many persons indicated disaster is not have a strong relation with plastic or health waste, climate change, normal solid waste, others, and each issue have some, but before we are not sure about this kind of relation, but resilient means this kind of network. When we think about normal solid waste management, we should think about disaster. And when we think about plastic, maybe we can pay attention to disaster. And that kind of networking might be resilient. And from the view of climate change, maybe the scenery is different. From climate change, maybe can take very good relation with many other issues. So this kind of networking is a kind of tangible resilient, I think. Then more than there are many levels. This is a waste management, resilient waste management level. Then, so as we discussed, maybe there is some layer of policy or budget, how we allocate. This is not a discussion about disaster waste or even disaster. We have secure the budget, but if we try to secure the budget or policy only for disaster, the resource is very limited. But by connecting these issues, maybe we can make a comprehensive and make a good budget or some planning. maybe as Glenn said, that kind of is a very strategic BCM. Then finally, we should aware of many stakeholders to make these issues resilient. Policymakers, local government, and academia. Maybe we are most of the participants in academia and private sector and other stakeholders, as Wasara-san said. Then what is the role of academia? Yes, maybe we can see the importance of this kind of network resilience in from the perspective of academic or scientific manners. So yes, this is very easy, but I think how to mainstream these things to policymaker. Maybe we can show some evidence or clear statistic or some clear academic papers or something. So to conclude the session, maybe for academia, we should aware this kind of network as a resilience. Then we should work for make some kind of academic approach to show this kind of structure to policymaker, some local government, or even as a stakeholder. So that is my last words. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Higashi-san. Well, that was a perfect wrap up for us. Helped understand, organize what we've discussed and the key issues and key aspects of resilience and waste management. So that concludes our session today. I'd like to thank all the panelists for joining us and the great audience today. We would like to close the session with a big applause to everyone. Thank you very much. And Suzuki-san, thank you and see you again.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.